Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sonya Comiskey and I'm a 2018 Nuffield Scholar. I'm delighted to be with you here today to share my presentation. I found it incredibly challenging to try and distill 2 years of learning and a broad-ranging topic into a very short time, but I'll do my best. Today will simply be a snapshot of what's in my more detailed report. I aim to provide you with some background information about the drivers for my topic, what I saw in my travels as key success factors, and my thoughts on recommendations to industry. It has been a real honour to have been awarded a Nuffield Scholarship. The network I've become part of and the opportunities that have become available to me are life-changing. None of this would have been possible without the support of investors like Rabobank, who invested in me, and the contact with their amazing people on a regular basis, like Will Banks. I'd also like to thank Nuffield Australia for their support during the past 2 years, whilst I've been navigating considerable upheaval in my personal and business life. And a shout out to my Japan GFP cohort. I'm lucky to have been part of such a fabulous group. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge my parents, Mike and Nola, who are watching me today through the magic of technology from far away. I'm blessed to have such a wonderful family and friends who kept the home fires burning. I'd like to make special thanks to my children, Victor and Roman. You may be surprised to know that for many people, upon hearing of my Nuffield Scholarship, the first words out of their mouth were to express concern about the long periods of time I'd be away from my children, rather than offering congratulations. And sadly, this has been reported as a common experience among us scholars who also happen to be mothers. I truly believe that despite my absences, my Nuffield journey has shown my children that the success of female founders comes from going the extra mile, and for them that they too need to do the extra work that success and personal development requires. I trust that my example will mean that in their generation, they model a different type of behaviour in relation to the perception of women in agriculture, particularly the mums operating in business leadership roles. I've spent the past decade or so as co-founder of an award-winning beef enterprise, producing commercial crossbred Bazadais cattle in the Central Highlands of Queensland. A combination of drought, the live export debacle and business structure risk led me to investigate a pivot away from traditional commodity production into the development of branded beef program. Recently, I founded a new company to do just that, under the banner of Epicurean Beef, working with other producers, feedlots, processors and technology platform owners to bring the new brand to life in both export and domestic markets in the new year. My study objectives were to look at the challenges and opportunities in successful branded beef programs overseas. The branded beef space sits within the $11.5 billion Australian industry, which is largely two ends of a scale. At one end, we have very large multinational processors or big corporate producers dominating the scene, and at the other end, very small producers operating at, say, farmers' markets with little capacity to scale or tap into supplying the export markets that comprise more than 70% of our industry. And in particular, I wanted to look at how collaboration, provenance and technology influence the business and how mid-sized producers can establish their own programs. For my independent study, I looked at successful niche premium branded beef programs in Europe and the United States of America. I also looked at other products such as pork, cheese, seafood, gin and whiskey to see what they could offer to beef and what we could learn. One of the unique differences about beef is the challenge of carcass balance, where generally not all parts of the beast are sold in one transaction. However, I won't speak about that in detail today. For the purposes of my study, I looked at 3 basic models of supply for branded beef programs. And it became obvious to me that there's a key difference in the way successful branded production programs manifest their business model by using value chain rather than traditional supply chain thinking. And I was thrilled to hear David Crombie speaking about that quite emphatically last night in the George Wilson oration. They tend to view the world from the customer back, using a reverse engineering approach which permeates decisions around sales, distribution, packing, processing, and ultimately to production systems on farm. My key findings were about the success is really all about people, collaboration at every link in the value chain. While I was busy looking for structural mechanisms like cooperative business models or supply contract examples, I was actually shocked to discover that there were multi-million-dollar businesses I was talking to who don't even have proper contracts for processing and distribution. They function solely on the merits of rock-solid relationships, with some bits maybe sketched on the back of a beer coaster. The lack of contractual rigour was also apparent in the US, which really surprised me. There was more of an intimacy in the business relationships, rather than being solely focused on commercial price components. Truly collaborative branded programs tended to create opportunities to bring the different blocks of the value chain together, such as conference events, with production, processing, distribution and customers all in the same room together. It's also become very clear to me that there needs to be a fundamental mind shift in the way that we think. We can't try to be Swiss Army knives, human Swiss Army knives, tacking on more elements to our business and think we'll still keep doing the jobs we've got to do. The classic working on your business and not in it cliché. Our role becomes a focus on ensuring all the moving components of the business are working together effectively as a function of that value chain, always with the end consumer in mind. Nobody cares if your herd has consistent coat colour. They care about the steak on the plate. I'm talking about a fundamental mind shift away from being a cattle producer to being a beef producer. And I think this quote here from Mark Hayward and Paul Hayward of Dingley Pork in Suffolk in the UK demonstrates what I'm talking about. Closing the loop between consumer perceptions, packaging, logistics and processing, carcass data, production management systems, all the way back to the initial genetic selections. And this concept was shared as a cultural value through the whole enterprise in my observation, not just by the owners. People marking cattle in the yards could speak to the company's brand values and name some of their flagship clients as effectively as any of the senior staff could. Consistently, across Europe and the USA, branded programs told me that their biggest challenge was access to service or access to more capacity of service processing. Most of them tended to process with large modern plants in order to ensure state-of-the-art processing and packing for quality and shelf life. I myself have experienced this with the only processor who would take on a startup program located interstate, some 14 hours by truck from my farm gate. For the past 6 months, I've been requesting processing space, and as a result of destocking from severe drought, there's simply no space available for the foreseeable future. I've access to cattle and I've customers that really want product, but I can't turn cattle into beef right now. And I realise that when it finally rains, and let's hope that's soon, that'll all go away. But it's not a sustainable way of doing business. It will happen again. It's interesting to note that the Fitzroy Basin area where I live has more cattle than all of the Northern Territory. It has more cattle than all of Western Australia, with 2.2 million head. We have 4 very large processing plants within a 4-hour catchment, yet practically none of them provide service processing services. Service processing is a service for the mid-sized producer in particular. This is the single biggest problem in my business right now, and it's something that I thought was unique to Australia. But I've discovered that it's reflected in the processing industry landscape in much of the UK, parts of Europe and in the USA as well. Solving this problem is a clear opportunity for the promulgation of successful niche premium brands, and in keeping with our national brand proposition, to trade on quality and our clean green merits in export markets rather than price alone. Provenance. In seeking to establish a rapport with each other, when humans meet, they often seek to find out where each other are from and what's your story. The same can be said about brands and products and the notion of their provenance, especially as they relate to food. So what is provenance? As you can see, it comes from a French word, and it basically means what's the story behind the brand or product. And in the beef setting, the provenance encompasses the whole journey of a product from conception to consumption. I observed 3 main types of provenance in my study travels: Geographic or regional provenance, such as Scotch beef PGI, seen in Scotland, by far the most desired brand I saw at the Harrods meat counter and arguably throughout Britain. Production system provenance, such as products which carry the Pasture for Life certification mark in the UK, and I found this type of provenance tended to be associated with nutritional or ethical consumer values rather than eating quality alone. And lastly, heritage provenance, associated with breed, history or brand story, such as La Grande Piedmontese beef in Italy or Heart brand Akaushi beef in the USA. The businesses that I looked at are small giants. They're best in their niche where quality is everything. Staying small allows them greater agility to manage their quality standards and keep their niche premium status. In all cases, it provided them with access to higher price premiums than their commodity market colleagues, and I saw anything from 20% to 200% return above base commodity pricing. For the most part, this translated to adopting things like DNA verification to evidence the provenance, such as Heart brand Akaushi beef. Or it was manifested in investing in leading genetics research and meat science testing to validate eating quality claims, such as Dingley Dell Pork, who worked with 2018 UK scholar Caroline Keeley. Success was manifested in reputation and perception of the product and brand value, not in turnover or volume units. For the most part, it was heritage provenance that was able to garner the greatest premium. As a producer, I never thought much about giving the Meatworks buyer a tailored special experience in his visit to the farm. All the brands I visited used experiences through visits to the farm in some way. Here's a screenshot of an Instagram post by Dingley Dell Pork, where you can see chefs and butchers engaging in human interaction with the piglets. This is not just for show, it actually forms part of their production system. La Grande, based in Genoa, Italy, have partnered with global Italian food promoters Eataly. They have Michelin-starred chefs leading masterclasses with their customers, educating them on the best preparation of their lean carcass Piedmontese beef. Often these experiences will cater for influencers like celebrity chefs who then go on to share their experience with their wider audience. And almost exclusively, it wasn't until this happened that producer-led brands gained real traction in the market. Creating the venue, the events and the activities that go into an experience which develops an emotional rapport with your brand was important. Something we certainly don't do much of or well here in Australia and remains a challenge given the tyranny of distance from whether you have metropolitan-based clients or in fact are focused on export markets. I think there's a great opportunity here for the adoption of immersive technology such as virtual reality to tap into the same sense of connection to the provenance story, yet I saw little of it in practice in my travels. From what I could see, many enterprises seem to only work intuitively with their customer base in the adoption of customer-led design principles, the approach of looking back from the customer perspective of the value chain. Leading into my travel, I'd been hearing for many years that as producers, and I still hear it here this year, we need to tell our story, yada, yada, yada. And I was frustrated because nobody ever tells me what people want to know and how they want me to tell it to them. So I went out thinking I'd find some silver bullets, but as happens in the Nuffield experience, I did not. What I did learn was that we just need to directly ask the customer what they need to know in the way that we want them to engage. Work out how we capture that content all the way back to the farm and close the conception to consumption loop is the next stop. I feel it's still not well understood by producers and that more work needs to be done in validating our customer assumptions with real evidence. And of course, technology, social media, etc. play a large part in this. I also took the opportunity in my travels to look at distributed ledger technology. An example of this is blockchain that you might have heard of. This is the platform that enables the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. It's quite complex and could easily be an entire presentation in itself. To that end, I'm just going to touch on a couple of important differences between conventional technology and distributed ledger technology. Where most technology relies on a single ledger to hold all the data, like the way your bank holds all your account transactions, distributed ledger technology has no one central ledger. Transactions are verified by multiple parties and form blocks like sausage links on a chain attached to a product. Multiple synchronised versions of the ledger are held through a distributed network, creating an almost immutable record. Access can be granted to all or some of the blocks of the transactions to provide information to third parties. So who's doing it? The most notable example I saw that related to my area of interest was provenance.org in the UK. They've adopted blockchain technology to underpin their platform, which evidences claims associated with product provenance. You can't see the blockchain technology, you see the platform that it's built on. In interviewing their CEO, Jessie Baker, one phrase that she said to me really stayed with me. Their organisational mission is to decommoditise the commodity by evidencing and engaging consumers with the provenance story in a way that credentials product claims and brand values through a relationship of trust. This technology and its potential to disrupt the way we do business is still very much nascent in the agri-food industry and really only at early adopter stage. I saw very little adoption of distributed ledger technology in the field. There was only a low level of understanding of it and its possible benefits. The key opportunities lie in the applications that can be created. For example, smart contracts, which have the potential to cut out the middleman in deals between producers and clients, including in the commodity space. Fast-tracking and securing international trade payments, which is highly attractive in our predominantly export-oriented beef markets. And of course, credentialing provenance and authenticity in a world where food fraud has been estimated by PwC in Australia to be worth $65 billion per annum. I don't think I need to explain my next slide too much. The priority for my business is to solve the service processing problem because I don't have a business. In making recommendations to industry, I'm focusing on addressing the service processing gap and the barriers to entry and scale for branded beef programs in order to capitalise on this unexploited opportunity. I believe there are several levers we can pull. One is to de-risk entry into the market through grants and other financial structures. And I'm not talking the massive North Australia Infrastructure Development Fund type grants, but small-scale investments, more appropriate to emerging industries, particularly those which might encompass circular economy principles. Consideration of tax offsets, deferrals or depreciation schemes. The provision of skilled resources which can help pull together multidisciplinary teams to provide whole solutions, not just processing plants, by adopting a cluster-based approach for regional development in order to maximise access to logistics and last-mile solutions. I believe industry and government need to recognise that smaller and more agile greenfield sites can allow us to do things better to start with, rather than focusing on retrofitting ageing mega plants. I think we need to facilitate the foundational adoption of technology with automation, robotics and renewable energy systems. Recognise through investment and effort that this approach will have a positive effect on regional communities, animal welfare, eating quality and environmental stewardship. We have some amazing beef producers in Australia, and in Queensland in particular, if I'm going to wear my heart on my sleeve, with niche premium products that will never come to market if we think that the way that we do it today is the only way to do it. Becoming a Nuffield Scholar is a privilege and an achievement and an experience that I will treasure for life. I look forward to publishing my report where I can go into much more detail about a topic that I'm very passionate about. Thank you for being here today to share my story.